I love cheese. I recently moved to the South and discovered pimento cheese for the first time. But my love affair with cheese began when I was just a little tiny low-income girl in rural Vermont, and we got the government surplus cheese delivered to our house through the WIC program, the Women, Infants, and Children. I loved that WIC cheese from a young age. My Long Island, New York, secular Jewish mother eloped on the back of a motorcycle with my Mississippi River playing Illinois Baptist-raised father when they were both in college. He was finishing his master's degree, she was in undergrad, and after they both graduated, they decided to move to Vermont and homestead. Neither had ever farmed before. My mother had never even had a houseplant. They got together with a few clueless, hyper-intellectual, like-minded friends and had some books and decided to give it a go. Now, my father had been to his mother's family's farm a few times as a boy, but his mother never said that she was a farmer's daughter. She only used her green thumb for flowers, and she hid her practicality behind her antique china collection. And moving to Vermont and homesteading was a counterculture thing back then, like a real young Bernie Sanders or Ben and Jerry before they made ice cream. I knew these people. Life on the farm was a little bit tricky, but my parents rented this crumbling old house that had a big yard and an outbuilding, and it was surrounded on all sides by the landlord's cow pastures. I can still remember the sound of the mooing in the morning and the cow patties. We had a wood stove, and it was our primary source of heat. My father got this old manure spreader from somewhere and attached it to a tractor, and during some of my mother's few moments of a break from the two young children, we drove around scouting for dead trees, my sister and I looking, my father stopping and chopping the wood and loading it into the manure spreader with us. We had some sheep, an occasional duck and chickens, and between weasel raids, we had meat and eggs. I remember when I was about 4 years old and I learned the meaning of the expression like a chicken with its head cut off for the first time. I'm not going to comment whether or not that later fueled my decades worth of vegetarianism, but I could never be a vegan though, because cheese. I know that not all cheese is strictly vegetarian, but I've always justified eating it because it's cheese. We had an enormous garden that was overrun with onions. And we had a kitchen that was sometimes smoky and dark, but it was the center of the action. I remember my father kept bees, and he rented this giant silver honey extractor. And there was the smell of the beeswax combined in my memory with my mother's shouts as my father removed his beekeeping equipment inside the kitchen, filling it with stray bees. I remember my mother cutting onions and crying, and frying the onions and still crying, transported back to her grandmother's kitchen at the back of their city cosmetics store, where the smell of fried onions and chicken fat overpowered the flowery cosmetics. Food has that inescapable, almost magical quality. Now, my mother didn't know how to cook, but she did learn to bake bread, and I can still smell that yeasty warmth. Bread and honey, bread and butter, bread and cheese. My parents got together with their friends and they formed this loose organization that ordered bulk items at discount rates, local maple syrup, grains, and other things. They started an alternative school where the children could run wild and free, or maybe sit quietly in a corner and draw. And as my father did as many construction jobs as he possibly could, never using his master's degree, he learned to do income tax returns on the side. Life was hard. Growing season is very short in Vermont. The winter was cold. Often we had no heat. Sometimes we ran out of food. And one summer I remember the well went dry. But it was here that I learned to be a foodie. My sister and I used to get super excited when the car drove up with the WIC delivery person. Every month, without fail, winter or summer, a box of food would arrive, and there was always peanut butter, milk, sometimes cereal, orange juice, and my beloved government cheese. Now, this was Vermont in the early 70s, the land of the Cabot Creamery cheese. So the WIC cheese was actually a 2-pound block of sharp Cabot cheddar. I pay good money for the same cheese in the Walmart these days, but then it was free and delivered down the dirt road to our isolated house. One day, my little sister was so excited that she ran out to meet the WIC delivery person, and I came with her too, and my mom followed behind, and my sister was shouting, "I'm so excited! Guess what? I'm a big girl! It's my birthday! I'm 5 years old!" My mother smiled and rolled her eyes because she knew that age 5 was the cutoff for the eligibility for the WIC food. This was our last delivery. Not long after that, my parents waved the white flag on the whole homesteading thing, and they moved us to town. There in town, there were sidewalks and neighborhood children, and we could ride our bikes to the store. My sister and I went to public school, and I finally learned to read. It was a wonderful and interesting place to be. That co-op, that loose organization, had actually become a store, and it was bike riding distance from my house. They still had foods in bulk and local maple syrup and all kinds of yummy whole food and nutritious things, but they also had a deli with a cheese counter. And if you went on the right day at the right time, they had free samples. I sampled cheese from all over the world at the co-op. One of the strangest ones I remember having was this Norwegian cheese. And my reading was confusing because it started with a GJ and I couldn't say it. I thought they were saying something like Yetost. I'm not sure, but it was the color of a piece of caramel. And when you sliced it, it had this squeak, and it tasted like boiled condensed milk. There was a cheese plant across the railroad tracks from my house that Cabot bought out. You could actually smell the cheese at that house in town. My grandparents left the city, and they came and moved in down the street. And they brought with them things from my mother's childhood. Television and food, matzabrei, kashavarnishkas, kugel, cheese blintzes, bagels and cream cheese, orange cream soda mixed with juice. My other grandparents also moved to Vermont. They moved about an hour away, buying a house on the National Historic Register and filling it with antiques and giving tours. I went to high school where I excelled. I got an academic scholarship and I went off to college, vowing never to come back. I stayed and worked on campus during the breaks. I tried to not go home. One day I was in the dining hall sitting at the international table with my friends from all over the world, the international club, and my high school guidance counselor walks in. He was thrilled to see me there for a conference, and he came to me and he said, "Kyra, what about your high school experience prepared you to do so well here at college?" I said, "Absolutely nothing. My high school experience was awful. This is all me." I used that academic scholarship to help fund my junior year abroad in France, the land of cheese. There I had all kinds of amazing and exotic and delicious cheeses. One I remember is called Concoyote, and it's this runny, raw, pungent dip of cheese that can be served hot or cold. I had Comté, I had Brie, Camembert, I had Chèvre, I had Roquefort. I actually went on the cheese tour of the Loire Valley. Students, we were all on a bus and we stopped in all of these little villages and would go to the charcuterie and get the cheese, every color of the rainbow, all kinds of different flavors made from the milk of cows, the milk of sheep, the milk of goats, anything else you could milk, all with that same cheesy tang. I had Gouda and Edam in Amsterdam. I actually had cheese fondue in Switzerland. I had feta cheese in Greece. About 10 months into the trip, it was July, and I was in Italy, going to see the great feats of art and architecture. Now, I had my backpack and my Eurail pass. I did not want to be taken for a stupid American, though. So I wore French clothes. I dressed in my French outfit. I had my French shoes. I even carried a French shopping bag with me, and I spoke only in French. Bonjour. Je suis française. Je ne suis pas un de ces imbéciles américaines. Non, pas du tout. Moi, je suis française. I came to the city of Florence, Firenze, in Italy, and I wanted to see this bridge. It's the oldest one in Florence over the River Arno. It's from the medieval times. It's one of the older bridges in Italy that still stands and is used today, and it's lined all along the bridge itself with these shops that have been there for hundreds of years. And there I was, and just at the end of the bridge was a market selling cheese. Now, I was running out of money at this point, so I was saving my money for one authentic meal a day. And I decided I was going to get some exotic Italian cheese. When I went there, they had the cheese in these big vats or wheels or blocks. They would cut some or give it to you. You had to bring something from home if it was a soft cheese, or they would wrap it in cheesecloth and wax paper. Now, I'd had a lot of that cheese at the co-op. I didn't need Pecorino Romano. I'd had that. I didn't need Asiago. I didn't need mozzarella or ricotta or mascarpone or gorgonzola. So I tried Italian. I was trying to say formaggio speciale, special cheese. Give me special cheese. So they cut me off a hunk of hard cheese. I gave them my money, and I went back to sit on a bench with my exotic cheese. I opened it. I took the spoon that I always carried in my backpack, took off a hunk. Cheddar? Wait a minute. Is this the wick cheese? I was angry. I was embarrassed. I wanted my money back. I had just traveled all the way to Italy, walked in the Tuscan July sun, and plunked my entire food budget for the day down on the Wick cheese. I sat on that bench in the shade for a little while. But I was hungry. And after a while, I got over myself. And I took out the cheese. And I had another bite. And this time, the cheese tasted of home. And it was truly delicious. No matter where you go, there you are.